Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Global markets see a brief recovery after 3 days of heavy selling that wiped off trillions of dollars in value. The stock market in Tokyo closed 6% up, while it opened higher in Europe. The US military to deploy long-range surveillance drones in Japan's Okinawa region near Taiwan as Beijing increases pressure on the self-ruled island, which it claims as its own. European prosecutors search Croatia's foreign ministry over suspected misuse of EU and national funds. This as Croatia struggles to fight corruption, an issue it pledged to tackle as a part of its 2013 EU accession. Algeria and Mali closed their airspace to each other amid rising tensions. The move follows Mali's accusation that its northern neighbor shot down one of its drones and supports terrorism. And a Russian rocket carrying a US astronaut and 2 Russian crewmates arrives at the International Space Station, with the Kremlin hailing space cooperation between Moscow and Washington. Hello and welcome. Our top focus remains on the escalating diplomatic row between the United States and South Sudan, the world's youngest nation. In the latest developments, Juba has accepted a DRC national deported by the United States, whose deportation sparked Washington to revoke all visas with South Sudanese citizens. South Sudan, in a statement shared on social media, said it would now allow the DR Congo citizen to enter after previously denying him entry. Now this to maintain friendly relations between the countries. Earlier on Monday, South Sudan criticized Washington for unfairly revoking all visas for its citizens. This was after the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, accused Juba of failing to accept the return of its citizens deported from the United States. South Sudan's foreign ministry also said that the DR Congo deportee, who was denied entry last Friday, had been returned to the U.S. with all supporting evidence.
The government deeply regrets that despite this history of collaboration and partnership, South Sudan now faces a broad revocation of visas based on an isolated incident involving misrepresentation by an individual who is not a South Sudanese national. Comprehensive verification processes confirm that this individual is a national of the Democratic Republic of Congo named Makula Kintu. In accordance with our immigration protocols, he was not admitted and was subsequently returned to the sending country for further processing.
Meanwhile, Juba has also called on Washington to engage in constructive dialogue to resolve the dispute. As a gesture of goodwill, South Sudan has instructed its embassy in the U.S. to issue emergency travel documents for 21 of the 23 individuals identified by the U.S. officials for repatriation. This comes as Washington's decision to curb all visas has left many South Sudanese in shock. particularly those with family members in the United States.
This statement, all of us were shocked because many of South Sudanese, they have their families in America. Also, some of them, they are here in South Sudan. So they used to go and come back. So if there's the issue like this, I think that is going to affect many people in South Sudan.
South Sudanese in the U.S. were granted Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, under the Obama administration in 2011 on the grounds that the country was unsafe because of fighting that started after it declared independence from Sudan. The designation was extended by the Biden administration. TPS for South Sudanese was set to expire by the 3rd of May. Since Trump returned to the White House, his administration has begun to overturn TPS designations for a handful of countries, including Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Trump has also begun deporting illegal immigrants, including from Africa. Last month, South Sudan was placed on a draft list of countries which could face restrictions on tourist, student, and some immigrant visas. It is also facing the brunt of Trump's baseline 10% tariff on exports to the U.S. Now, the revocation of visas by the U.S. has also sparked strong reactions in South Sudan, with the information minister accusing Washington of exploiting the nation's tense internal situation. South Sudan has long faced instability, with clashes threatening a peace agreement that ended a 5-year civil war in 2018. Tensions have flared in recent weeks, particularly after President Salva Kiir's government placed First Vice President Riek Machar under house arrest. The U.S. has already ordered its non-emergency staff to leave South Sudan, while it has repeatedly urged the government to de-escalate the tensions. But will this new diplomatic dispute over deportation further strain the relations between the two countries? Now, to discuss more on this, we have with us Dr. Remember Miamingi, who is a South Sudan analyst, joining us live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Thank you for being with us, Doctor.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
How significant is the diplomatic fallout from the U.S. visa ban on all South Sudan's nationals? And what are the potential long-term implications for U.S.-South Sudan relations?
No, thank you very much. This is very unfortunate and, in my opinion, ill-informed decision on the side of the American government has significant political, social, and economic implication in the short, medium, and long term for South Sudan. First, of course, it will deepen the mistrust that had existed between the government of South Sudan and the US, now to involve even the people of South Sudan, who the US had occupied such a deep place in their heart for the work that the government of the US did for South Sudan during their liberation wars. And that goodwill in the heart of South Sudanese, of course, will continue to be affected. In addition, it will also have significant, staggering human cost, right? Imagine that a South Sudanese woman who just walked into a CS, legal resident of the US, emerging from there, an lawful actor in that country. And that is not just that, they're students, they're sports people, there are families that live in the US and in South Sudan whose actions did not in any way contribute to where their government has placed them. And finally, I think, is the fact that you have citizens that run away from their country because they suffered from collective punishment through repression, through war, and sought refuge in the US, only to be subjected to the same collective punishment because of the act of the government that punished them in the first place. And now ready to send them back. If the TPS and all these other visas has taken effect, it means human rights activists, defenders, civil society actors who have operated in the US will find themselves on the plane back to Juba. And that is really, really troubling.
Right. And Dr., given South Sudan's claim that the deportee in question was actually a Congolese national, what legal or diplomatic avenues are available for South Sudan to contest and to potentially reverse the visa ban?
South Sudan had a number of diplomatic tools under international law and diplomatic practices that it would have used to be able to resolve this. But that will mean that South Sudan is dealing with a partner on the other side who operates on the basis of an international system that is rule-based, that respects international law, diplomatic niceties, practice, and principles, that they could have contested it. But I do not think the US is in that place now. That's number one. Number two, by capitulating in accepting someone that the government has clearly stated was not a citizen, that significantly and dramatically narrows any possibility of the government of South Sudan to contest this either through multilateral institutions, regional institutions like the African Union, friendly nations, that has weakened because it had already, and you can't blame South Sudan because you're dealing with a very powerful bully.
And how might this incident affect the broader perception of US immigration and foreign policy in Africa, especially when actions are taken based on what South Sudan describes as misidentification?
No, of course, for some time already, we've seen a growing perception among and across Africa of the impression that there is a government in the United States now that is not bound by justice, by mutual respect, but that is bent on exercising raw power, often on the arbitrarily, unilaterally, and disconnected from the reality on the ground. This government, of course, for it, might is right, and the weak, including African states, and many of them, are treated less as sovereigns, equals, and more as dispensable actors, in this unfolding food chain of international relations. And in that, what you are going to see is, as Africans feel precariously less equal and respected and vulnerable and cannot operate within the basis of international law and rule base, it opens up African states and this continent to alternative global alliances where Africans and African states feel they are treated as partners and treated equally and not rendered vulnerable and maybe protected against strong powers. So US influence will decline, alternative global alliances influence on the continent will increase, and the relationship, of course, between those countries will suffer significantly.
Absolutely. Doctor, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa and for your valued insights and analysis there.
Thank you very much for having me.
We now shift focus to Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. It is the headquarters of the African Union, but yesterday it was the center of a diplomatic storm. An Israeli diplomat was expelled from an AU conference, despite claims of a formal invite by Israel. The African Union held a commemoration of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. The event took place in Addis Ababa. But Israel's ambassador to Ethiopia, Avraham Neguise, was barred from attending. Israel said that he was invited, but still he was shown the door. Now, it has called the incident outrageous and accused the African Union of bringing in anti-Israel political elements. The criticism was also directed at Mahmoud Yusuf, the chair of the AU Commission, for his comments made during the ceremony. Now, Israel says it is an observer member of the African Union, but its status is contested. Israel was an observer in the African Union's predecessor, the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU. In 2002, the OAU was dissolved and replaced by the African Union. But Israel's status did not carry over. In 2021, the AU Commission chair granted Israel observer status unilaterally. The move sparked outrage within the AU, mainly from South Africa and Algeria. The AU then formed a committee to review the decision. So far, there has been no final verdict. Until then, Israel's observer status remains suspended. Now, this is not the first time that Israel's participation in an African Union meeting has stirred controversy. In 2023, an Israeli diplomat was escorted out of an AU Heads of State summit. Now, officials said that she was not the accredited representative. Israel accuses South Africa and Algeria of blocking its AU presence. It says both countries are too close to Iran. Both of these nations have heavily condemned Israel's ongoing war in Gaza. South Africa has taken it further. It filed a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Several African nations have backed this case. Now, Israel still holds diplomatic relations with 46 out of the 54 African countries and has normalized ties with Arab nations like Morocco and Sudan. But its Africa outreach is under strain amid an expanding offensive in Gaza. And now shifting focus to Rwanda, where the commemoration of the 1994 genocide also took a heated turn. During events marking 31 years since the genocide against the ethnic Tutsis, President Paul Kagame struck a defiant tone, responding to global criticism over Rwanda's role in the DRC. He lashed out at Western countries imposing sanctions, telling them, quote unquote, "Go to hell."
If anyone comes around and thinks they can, they come and say, hey, we're going to sanction you. To what? Go to hell. Just go to hell. You have your own issues to deal with. Go and deal with your own issues. Leave me to mine.
Rwanda faces growing pressure over alleged support to the Tutsi-led M23 rebels. The UK and Germany have cut aid. The US imposed sanctions on a Rwandan minister. The EU has done the same and is also reviewing a crucial mineral deal. Now, then Canada has suspended export permits and official visits. Apart from a furious response to these Western nations, Kagame has also cut ties with Belgium, accusing the former colonizer of consistently undermining Rwanda. Rwanda is accused of supporting the M23 rebels, a Tutsi-led militia in eastern DRC. The group has taken control of large swathes of territory, displacing hundreds of thousands of civilians. UN experts say that Rwanda has up to 4,000 troops in the region. President Kagame insists that Rwanda is not waging war, but is defending itself. He points to the presence of militias in eastern DRC linked to the 1994 genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda. But the present-day fight isn't just political. It has turned into a battle for rich mineral resources. The DRC's east is rich in key minerals like cobalt, tungsten, and tantalum. It's used in smartphones and electronics. The DRC accuses Rwanda of using M23 rebels to loot the minerals, which then enter the global supply chain. Under Kagame, who rose to power in post-genocide Rwanda, the country built strong Western ties. It sent troops to various peacekeeping missions. While it has also made efforts to build soft power by hosting tech summits and global events. But critics say that the image shielded it from accountability. Now, as the M23 gains ground, that shield may be breaking. Rwanda still relies heavily on Western aid. Meanwhile, countries like the United States have started engaging with the DRC for a potential mineral deal. Efforts to ease tensions between the DRC and Rwanda are underway. Kagame met with the DRC president in Qatar last month for the first time since escalations began in January. The M23 has also withdrawn from a strategic town after private talks with the Congolese government. But as Kagame digs in, can Rwanda withstand global heat? Or will this defiant posture backfire? In what might be the most polite yet pointed breakup in modern geopolitics, a growing number of West African nations are officially giving the French language and France itself the diplomatic side-eye. Niger is the latest to slam the door by announcing that Hausa, its a new national language, as it is spoken widely, and bumping French down to basic working language status. Now, the bold linguistic makeover is part of Niger's freshly baked Refoundation Charter. It is the blueprint for rebranding the nation, culturally, politically, and alphabetically. The charter also officially installs General Abdourahmane Tiani as the head honcho for a 60-month transition period. Now let's rewind a bit. The Organisation Internationale de la Francophone, or the OIF, a French-speaking Commonwealth, suspended Niger after the July 2023 coup that ousted President Mahmoud Bazoum. In response, Niger exited the organization in March last year. Now, the French embassy in Niger has also been closed indefinitely. The French troops packed their bags and left in December of 2023. And to really drive the point home, Niger has been renaming streets to erase colonial-era names and rewriting history from its own perspective. But Niger isn't flying solo in its Francophone detox. It joins neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso, who also recently bolted from the OIF, where France traditionally played the lead vocalist. Now, these junta nations quit regional bloc ECOWAS and are now harmonizing their own chorus under the alliance of Sahel states. Mali has also rewritten its constitution, demoting French from official to just a working language last year. This is while promoting 13 national languages like Bambara and Dogon to the top tier. Now, over in Burkina Faso, the government passed a bill in 2023 to revise the constitution. They elevated national languages as official and dropped French to the role of assistant language. Not to be outdone, Algeria is also tiptoeing away from French. Algeria has decided this month that starting from the next academic year, the first-year medical and science students will be taught entirely in English. That's right. Bonjour, meet, goodbye. Now, this is also a political move amid frayed relations with Paris. So what's happening here? West African nations are doing a little spring cleaning, dusting off colonial hangovers and redecorating their national identity walls with homegrown languages and alliances. In this case, language is a symbol of autonomy, resistance, and a big au revoir to the colonial past that just won't quit. The message is clear. These countries are no longer content to speak the language of their colonizers. And if that means breaking up with French and cozying up with Hausa, Bambara, or even English, then so be it. So France, are you still there? Looks like you have been left on red. And that's it on the show. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.